beautiful humans, and welcome to the Mental Wellness Wake Up Show. I am mental wellness expert, creativity coach, and improvised acting teacher, Dawn McMillan, the spiritual psychotherapist, and I am delighted you are here. You are in for a special treat because today I have a very special guest. My guest is Jami Parrish, who has an impressive list of credentials. Not only is Jami a licensed professional counselor, a certified sex addiction therapist, an EMDR specialist, she's also a spiritual director. But even more impressive than her credentials from important bodies is her perspective on life, on therapy, on what it takes to be a human. Jami practices from the psychodynamic tradition, and I guarantee you it's probably not what you think it is. So today we're going to cover some really important topics. We're going to talk about the cultural reasons you might not know the truth about psychoanalysis, and how that longing you feel for connection might actually be depth deprivation. And then Jami shares with us a simple practice for instant peace. It's so good, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So make sure you stay till the end. Let's dive in. Well, welcome, Jami. I'm so glad that you're doing this with me.
Well, thanks, Dawn. I'm excited to
So
talk with you.
as we were just getting talking about the kind of work that you do, which is in-depth work, which is different than a lot of the therapy that people are getting these days, especially if they're getting those 6 sessions from their job. It's like, okay, you got 6 sessions, fix everything. So really what I would love to hear about is what's it like being on the psychodynamic perspective in therapy?
Like, what's it like for me? Oh, I love it. I think that therapists have to do the form of therapy that really works for them. But for me, psychodynamic, psychoanalytic work is really therapy. I mean, I get to sit and be with a person for however long. I mean, my sessions typically are 50 minutes, but some people want longer and some people want more than once a week. For me, it's about really getting to know someone, and not just to have a surface conversation, but really in the service of helping them understand themselves so that they can see the patterns and how they've been living their lives in a way where they can then look at it and then heal whatever wounds need to be healed. But ultimately, the ultimate goal is freedom, right? So that they can choose how to be freely, regardless of societal pressures, internal pressures, other pressures.
Well, that sounds good.
Yeah.
How do I sign up for that? So a lot of people, when we think about like psychodynamic or we hear psychotherapy, you know, we always think about Freud and someone lying on a couch with their therapist, not looking at them, saying, "Tell me about your mother." So what are those how much of those stereotypes are even remotely close to the kind of work that you experience?
Well, I do. I'm in analysis with a Lacanian. So Lacan, philosopher analyst, had a return to Freud. So we revisited Freud. But I do lay on the couch, and I do have a sofa people lay on. I think for some people, it's very helpful. Even being on the phone can be helpful. And for other people, not. So people always have a choice. They can lay on my sofa, or they can sit in a chair. I have a chair that reclines, so we can sit across from each other. So that can be true for people. But again, it's a choice. I'm not going to force someone to lay on a sofa if they're not comfortable with it. But I encourage some people to try.
That's so interesting, right? And so you had just said that the ultimate goal is the freedom to choose, and you begin that right away with, you know, this, even at the beginning of this relationship here, we're going to start exploring what it is that you choose and find out which works better for you. I imagine for some people that right there is revolutionary. Like, oh, I get to choose for myself.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny how much people want you to tell them what to do. And often that becomes the focus for some people. I mean, not everybody. None of the things that I'm saying nothing's fundamental. Like anything I say, it really depends on the person.
So unlike other types of therapy, which are sometimes very structured, very manualized, like first you do this and then you do this, it's there, your practice goes nowhere near that level of control and rigidity.
Right. No, although I do utilize some of those strategies, of course, with some people, and I am trained in EMDR and some other modalities I'll utilize, but no, I don't believe in manualized treatment, and I don't believe in the medical model, although sometimes we all fall into it. So,
I would love to hear you say more on that, because I know you've worked in places that were adhering to the medical model. So what did you see there that helped you confirm I don't want to do that?
Well, and I think this is more of a new thing for me as I have progressed in my own life and my own work, and then in working with people. But if you really think about the DSM and manualized treatment, so let's look at that. So somebody comes to you, maybe they're talking really rapidly, and they seem really anxious, and they've had trauma, but they really worry and fixate on certain things. There are like 5 different diagnoses that person can have, and may end up, if they leave with a psychiatrist or another therapist, with all of those diagnoses, because they technically fit all of those. But what's really going on, and does knowing that diagnosis necessarily help? Well, not necessarily. It can be helpful. Certainly if somebody comes to me and I think that they are, say, bipolar, well, then yeah, they may need some meds, right? I'm not going to say that it isn't helpful and useful. It can be. But for my work, when I am sitting with a person, there's so many aspects to the unconscious and what's going on, that just looking at a person as a diagnosis and fitting this, and this is what I do, to me, that's not useful necessarily. What's interesting, though, is people forget that all of these therapies came out of psychoanalysis. And all the CBT therapists, for example, had analysts and still do. It's sort of like this unspoken rule I've heard, in
deep dark secret, right?
Yes. And when we talk about all the research, but evidence-based, that's the term. We talk about evidence-based. If you look at Jonathan Shedler, and I've recently had posted a great video I found by him. I love Jonathan Shedler. You should interview him if you can. He talks about in his research that if you look at actual research and do meta-analysis, people who do psychodynamic psychotherapy get better and continue to get better after the therapy has stopped, and at higher rates. So when you look at these evidence-based in the research, like, what is the research you're looking at? What are the studies? What are they studying? Because even in manualized treatments, nobody's doing it exactly the same. And how much of that, as we all know, the relationship is the most important thing, right? Well, a lot happens in that relationship, the transference, the repetitions. So there's a lot of things that can happen within that are rich material to work with. And people may be working with those, but not realizing it.
Yeah, that's such a great point, right? Because every meta-analysis of therapy at some point acknowledges that a huge impact on the therapy, regardless of the modality, is the relationship with the therapist. So that does beg the question of how much of the work are you doing, if you were to be observed and analyzed, is from the psychodynamic tradition, for one. And then for two, just my personal beef with evidence-based really is evidence-based means that someone had the money and the time to research the specific way of doing things. And it does not mean that other techniques and modalities aren't equally or as more effective. It just means that the Rand Corporation didn't throw $1 million at it to find out. So that's just me going off on my tangent about evidence-based.
But that's right. That's totally right. And people like me aren't going to be interested in doing a study with how would you even quantify all this? I don't know. So
Right, which goes right back to the DSM-5 and trying to quantify the complexities of human beings. And as you said, there is a place for the diagnoses. There is a place where it is helpful to begin to guide what next questions to ask or what other partners to bring in. If someone
Right.
is struggling with
Sure.
schizophrenia, they also might be someone who would benefit from
Mhm.
medication.
Right.
But I think we get too reductionist in our view of this is what the diagnosis is. These are the 5 things that you do to treat it. And then they're done. Okay, bye-bye, go fly.
Right. Right. And who's done. And the thing is, in psychodynamic work or in analysis, like a lot of that cognitive stuff does happen. It was like people are trying to skip steps to make it shorter, right? Like these things benefit insurance companies. These don't benefit. That's what a lot of these things are driven by, social institutions that I am not interested in. And we're kind of digressing from the question, although it relates, but it's something I have found really important. There's a lot of misconceptions about Freud. So like Freud said, everything is about sex. No, sex signifies everything else. It's very different. And Freud was one of the few people of his day who actually, despite what you think about the terms and this and that, and, sexism and all of this, he actually listened to his patients. So these women that would come in and were suffering and maybe were dismissed, he did listen to and tried to help. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions, and I've come full circle about this. I certainly don't think Freud was the end all be all, and psychodynamic work actually started in ancient Greece. And I think Freud knew that, was very aware of this. So these things are ancient, like I forget the guy's name. I just read a paper on it in ancient Greece, found a new talking cure. None of these things are really new. But there's this book that's been forgotten, and it's fabulous, and it's called The Repression of Psychoanalysis. And it is about the political Freudians. So they trained under Freud, and during World War II, were really taking a social stance, right? And women, this is another interesting fact about analysis, in the 20s, if you go back and look through papers from like the 20s and the early 1900s, a lot of the analysts were women, not men. They were women, a lot of women in these circles that were very well respected and doing a lot of really good work. It's a really fascinating history, and it got lost here during the war because analysis developed very differently in America and became very medicalized than it did elsewhere. And with the war, a lot of the political Freudians had to flee their country. Freud was Jewish, and a lot of these people were Jewish, and so they kept a really close circle and really struggled with how much politically to do and not, and having the diaspora that happened, they really had to conform in a lot of ways, and a lot of knowledge and history I think was lost. But Jacoby in this book really looked at this. So there's a really rich history. They didn't call it social justice, but really looking at societal factors in the analytic field and history.
I find it really hard to be surprised that a tradition that is full of really powerful minority women might have their voices silenced. Like, how many times has that happened in history, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I'm curious about how you found your way into the psychodynamic tradition, like personally.
I think it's been kind of a long roundabout one. So, in school, you don't learn much, if anything, about this. Like nothing. And what you do learn are a few pat things that are pretty much wrong. And it's really hard to find really good training. And the training that there is super expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And really not doable. Like it wasn't doable for me. There was a school here in Tucson. I couldn't afford to do it, and especially work and afford to do it. So, so I kind of had to teach myself, and it was hard to find people. So I did all the normal things, sort of learned and I still am learning from other people. But I really came into it when I started my own analysis with a Lacanian, and he's also a philosopher. There's a lot of philosophy that goes into this.
Mhm.
And so have come to a better understanding really in the past 5 or 6 years. Prior to that, working, to get my license and in treatment centers. And then initially I would utilize other modalities, and I certainly still do, but didn't really understand enough to really effectively probably engage in a psychodynamic model as much as now. And I really think it's key for people to do their own analysis to do this work, because you don't know the ways your unconscious is influencing it at all.
Yes, yes. And that makes the most sense, right? Like, I think every healer needs to see a healer,
Yeah.
and multiple ones, right? So if you're a psychotherapist, you not only need a therapist or a coach, you also need a massage therapist and an acupuncturist. Like, really, we all need
Right.
to be
Yeah.
doing our work. One of the things that I find intriguing about the psychodynamic tradition is it's a longer view. And in North America in the 2022, we're like the instantaneously faster. And I'm thinking that can be part of the pushback, right? Like you said, over the last 5 or 6 years, I've gotten this deeper understanding. Well, companies, behavioral health agencies and the insurance companies that are paying for them, they're like, no. We're not giving you 5 or 6 years for your own personal development. We're not giving anybody 5 or 6 years. If you could do it in 90 minutes, please do.
I have people who, pay me. They have access. They could go to any of these agencies, but their experiences have been so poor that they find a way to pay for it, because they're not getting help otherwise.
Yeah, which is sad, because obviously if you're motivated enough to go through the effort to look for help, you are motivated enough to do the work. You just need a situation that allows you to. And then from the flip side, therapists and counselors are also not getting the support that they need to be available to their patients, and are burning out at the same time.
Right.
So,
and I can say since doing my own work, I really don't experience that. And I, of course, don't work for an agency, so I don't have the same pressures. Agencies definitely burn out their therapists, period. I mean, I don't see any way that they can't. I've been there, and somebody wanted me to write a book about it, but I really didn't want to write about what I was experiencing at the time. So
right, like it's bad enough I'm experiencing it. I don't want to write about it too.
Exactly. So I didn't, and I might still. I think it's an important one. I went. So James Finley he's a former Trappist monk. Thomas Merton was his spiritual director, and he is a psychotherapist. He's older now, and he will not call himself this, but I believe wholeheartedly that he is a mystic. I've never met anybody as present as this man, ever. He's the only one I've ever experienced such presence with. And in one of my retreats with him, he said, we are depth deprived. And we are. And I think this is why there is such a need for the in-depth work where 2 people can just be together in a room. There are not the normal social rules. There are certain rules and structures, right? There's ethics and there are boundaries, but in general, people can say everything, and I'm not going to be offended. If I am, I got to figure out what that is about, and they can work through it in a way that you can't elsewhere, where we can really be together. Our identity develops with another person. So we need relationships. We're not lizards or turtles that lay their eggs and then chow. We need people. We need relationships, some to a more or less degree, but I think we're really experiencing a void. This takes the place of it, and clearly I'm passionate about it.
Yes. And I'm that when you said we're depth deprived, like, oh, I just got my truth goosebumps.
Yeah.
And when, especially over the last 2 years where people have been, experiencing isolation in new ways, and to hear you say we're all depth deprived, I think that's it. That sense of really being seen and heard and known, and not having to fit yourself into the social constructs and niceties of the moment, which is how we relate to each other so much. How are you? I'm fine. Busy. How are you? Oh, so busy. Okay, bye.
Right. And
Yeah.
I say those things when
Yes. Yeah.
I say those things too. We do
Mm-hmm.
that.
We do. And there's a place for it.
Right.
But I think we suffer when that's the only kind of interactions that we have.
Mm-hmm. Right. And in my world, like, I don't believe in, I guess I should say, I believe in speaking freely. I don't believe in editing for whatever reason. I mean, that's part of what the unconscious cuts out. So we have to speak freely to see where the cuts are. So a place where you can speak freely, and we work on whatever comes up, whatever that's going to be. I think that's the only way we can heal these places, is to be able to speak freely, which we can't do socially, really.
We cannot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I find myself wanting to like entirely evacuate all of the knowledge in your brain, which I don't think I can do because you've spent a long time acquiring it. And I would and I would love to shift a little bit to, we had talked earlier about some from your many different perspectives and trainings of ways that you help people. Do you have a practice or suggestion that you can share that might help people get a little centered with themselves, or provide them a little space or peace in the maddening world?
There's, and again, these practices aren't for everybody. Some may like them, and some may not. And these are really come from I have two that I'm thinking of. But I think I'll share the most simple one, which is a breathing technique, more of a pranayama exercise.
Beautiful.
And yeah, the thing is that people have to know is sometimes whatever the breathing technique is, whatever is said about it, breathing can create more anxiety and can be really activating. And people don't realize that. But I took a pranayama, for a while, a teacher with pranayama, and I was like, oh yeah, that's why. So some of these techniques, if people do them, they may not find it has the effect that they're wishing or that other people have. And people need to know that that's okay. That if it doesn't work for you, don't do it. Just stop.
Just don't do it. No judgment. You're not bad or wrong because you don't like this breathing technique that Gwyneth Paltrow recommended on her website.
Exactly. And I mean, and the same thing, I find this especially true with meditation. People don't know about Dharma sickness until now. Recently, they're studying the ill effects of meditation. So I really think that's an important thing for people to understand, that not everything is for everybody, and that's okay.
That's okay. And that's okay. Yes. Thank you for bringing that forward. That's important.
Yeah. So my technique is really simple. It's focusing on the exhale of your breath. So you want to inhale normally. I always say it's best to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. You don't have to do that. You can breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, but ideally through your nose. And you want to inhale normally and count it, and then lengthen and really slow down the exhale. And let your inhale then just be ordinary, and then see if you can double it, like slowly start to double the length of your exhale. And as you focus on the exhale, you'll naturally breathe more with your diaphragm. You'll naturally breathe more deeply. And ideally, it will stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system and reduce the fight or flight response. Ideally, it may not. You may get lightheaded because you're getting more oxygen, and that's normal. So don't do this while driving. But that's simple. You just would inhale for 3 and see if you can slow it down and exhale for 6. And then naturally count your inhale and then really slow down that exhale.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I was doing it as you were talking, and I just felt my shoulders drop about an inch away from my ears, and that
Nice.
soft belly breathing start to happen. And that was really lovely. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm so glad that we got to have this chat. I know that, as friends, we get to talk about what's on our minds and what the problems of the world and what we're going through. And I just, I respect and admire you so much. I really want to share your light and your perspective with other people. So this is great. We'll have to do it again. I just voluntold you that you're going to have to go do it again.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. I like chatting with you, so it's great. Thank you.
And thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks.
If any part of this pinged with you, I would be so grateful if you could like on whatever platform you're on, especially iTunes. That really makes a big difference. And then share this with at least one other person who might benefit from it. This channel is also on YouTube. So if you prefer to listen to your podcasts on YouTube, I know that sounds weird, but a lot of people do. I, for myself, have found some really great podcasts on YouTube, which is a visual medium, but I digress. Please like, subscribe, and share. It means so much to me. And for those of you who have reached out to me to let me know which episodes have really been meaningful for you and helpful to you, first of all, thank you for listening. Second of all, so grateful. So grateful. You can find me on most of the socials at the Dawn McMillan. All right. Bye.